Have you ever noticed how the smallest things in life somehow end up making the biggest difference? It's never the one giant leap that changes your future. It's the quiet, almost invisible steps you take when nobody's watching. People love to dream about the big moments, the promotion, the big break, the transformation. But what really builds those moments are the habits you practice in silence. It's the glass of water instead of the soda, the book you read instead of the hour you wasted scrolling, the decision to wake up on time instead of hitting snooze for the 5th time. The truth is, your life isn't shaped in the spotlight, it's shaped in the shadows, in those small, everyday choices that stack up until suddenly they define who you are. That's the magic of tiny habits. They don't look powerful in the moment, but they carry weight far greater than you realize. They're either building you up or breaking you down, creating a future you'll be proud of or a future you'll regret. The question is simple: are your tiny habits working for you or against you? Consistency is one of those words that gets thrown around so much that people stop paying attention to it, but it's the real backbone of every transformation, every success story, and every life that's shifted from ordinary to extraordinary. The truth is, the world doesn't reward you for showing up once in a while with a burst of energy. It rewards you for showing up over and over, even when it's boring, even when nobody's clapping, even when it feels like nothing is changing. Think about working out. You can go to the gym for 6 hours straight, push your body to the limit, and leave drenched in sweat feeling like a hero. But if you never go back for another month, it doesn't matter. That one intense day doesn't build strength, it just leaves you sore. Real growth comes from going for 45 minutes 3 times a week, stacking weeks into months, months into years, until it becomes part of who you are. The power lies not in the dramatic event, but in the repetition. This applies to every part of life. A musician doesn't master their instrument by jamming for one marathon weekend. They get there by practicing scales daily, sometimes painfully, sometimes without inspiration, but always with commitment. An investor doesn't create wealth by making one giant lucky trade. They grow it by consistently saving and consistently making disciplined choices, watching the small seeds compound into something powerful. Even in relationships, consistency is the difference between a friend you trust and a stranger you only hear from when they need something. It's the steady check-ins, the small gestures, the repeated actions that build trust and depth over time. The mistake a lot of people make is chasing intensity. They want the quick fix, the big moment, the sudden change that makes a story worth posting. They burn bright for a day, then disappear. Consistency, on the other hand, doesn't always look impressive in the moment. It looks quiet. It looks boring. But it's like planting seeds. You water them every day, even when nothing seems to be happening, and suddenly, months later, you've got growth that feels overnight to everyone else. But you know it came from all those invisible days of effort. Consistency is also tied to identity. When you repeatedly act in a certain way, those actions start to define you. If you run every morning, you don't just say, "I'm trying to run." You eventually say, "I'm a runner." That shift in language and self-perception is powerful because it's no longer about forcing yourself to do something. It's about living in alignment with who you believe you are. That only happens through repeated, consistent action. Another thing about consistency is that it creates momentum. The hardest part is always starting. Once you build a streak, whether it's days without breaking a habit, pages read in a book, or dollars saved in an account, the momentum makes it harder to stop. You don't want to break the chain you've built, and that momentum becomes a self-feeding cycle. Small victories push you to keep going, and before you know it, the results you thought were impossible start to feel natural. Consistency also demands patience. It forces you to surrender the fantasy of instant gratification and embrace the long game. That's why so many people quit. They expect results too fast. But consistency teaches you that the process is just as important as the destination. Every day you show up, even without seeing results, you're proving to yourself that you're committed, and that commitment becomes its own reward. At its core, consistency is about trust. You teach yourself that your word means something, that when you say you'll do it, you follow through. And once you build that trust with yourself, everything else in life becomes easier. People who can rely on their own consistency don't have to wait on motivation or inspiration. They move regardless. And over time, those small, repetitive steps separate them from everyone still waiting for the perfect moment. Discipline is one of those principles that doesn't look flashy on the surface, but ends up being the quiet force that separates the people who just dream about freedom from the ones who actually live it. When people hear the word, they often think of restriction, rules, or punishment. They picture giving things up, sacrificing fun, or living a rigid life with no room for spontaneity. But the truth is, discipline is the exact opposite of limitation. It is the tool that creates freedom, because without it, you're trapped by impulse, distraction, and lack of direction. The small disciplined choices you make every day don't just control the present, they shape the future. Take waking up early as an example. The undisciplined choice is to hit snooze, roll over, and steal another hour of comfort. That comfort feels good in the moment, but it costs you clarity, focus, and time you can't get back. Discipline, on the other hand, Is getting out of bed when you said you would, even if you're tired, even if the bed feels like the best place in the world. That one disciplined act creates more time in your day, more opportunities to get ahead, and a sense of control that carries into everything else you do. The freedom shows up later in the form of less stress, more progress, and the satisfaction of knowing you run your life instead of letting your laziness run it. Discipline also shows up in how you fuel your body. Choosing what to eat can feel small, almost irrelevant, but every choice is a vote for the future version of you. Discipline is saying no to the quick fix, the sugar rush, or the meal that slows you down, and saying yes to something that supports your health. Over time, those choices free you from sickness, fatigue, and regret. Without discipline, you end up chained to the consequences of careless decisions. With discipline, you create the freedom to move, to feel strong, and to live without limitations. The same principle applies to money. People think freedom is about spending whenever you want, buying everything you see, and living without limits. But that kind of reckless freedom always comes with a price: debt, stress, and regret. Discipline is choosing to save, to budget, to invest instead of waste. It might not feel fun in the moment, but it's what gives you the freedom to walk away from jobs you hate, to travel when you want, and to provide for the people you love. The short-term sacrifice builds long-term independence, and that's the real definition of freedom. Even in your craft, discipline is the difference between talking about goals and actually reaching them. Talent might get you attention, but discipline keeps you in the game long enough to maximize that talent. Writing every day, practicing your skill, training your body, studying your field. Those daily actions don't just create progress, they create mastery, and mastery opens doors that pure talent alone could never unlock. The freedom to choose your path, to call your own shots, only comes after you've been disciplined enough to build the foundation. What makes discipline powerful is how it compounds. One disciplined act might not change your life in a day, but stack them together, and suddenly you've built a structure you can stand on. Each choice strengthens your ability to make the next choice, and over time, it becomes less about forcing discipline and more about living naturally in alignment with who you are. That's when discipline transforms from effort into identity. People often look at successful individuals and assume they have more resources, more connections, or more luck. What they usually have is more discipline. They chose structure when others chose chaos, focus when others chose distraction, patience when others chose shortcuts. The reward is not just reaching their goals, but having the freedom to live on their own terms. Energy is the most valuable currency you own, more valuable than money, more valuable than time, because without energy, even if you have hours in the day and dollars in the bank, you can't use them well. Where you place your energy decides the quality of your life. Every action, every thought, every decision costs energy, and too many people spend it carelessly, like someone who gets paid on Friday and is broke by Monday. Protecting your energy doesn't mean shutting the world out. It means choosing wisely what deserves your focus and what doesn't. The tricky part is that energy leaks often come from things we don't even notice. Scrolling endlessly on your phone might not feel like a big deal, but it drains focus and leaves you restless. Arguing with people who don't matter, chasing approval, gossiping, or holding grudges, these are all silent withdrawals from your energy account. And when that account is empty, you have nothing left to invest in what actually matters: your goals, your health, your growth, your family. The freedom you want in life depends on protecting that account and spending it with intention. Think of your energy like sunlight. If you scatter it all over the place, nothing gets enough heat to grow. But if you focus it like a magnifying glass, you can set something on fire. That's why the people who achieve great things often seem obsessive. It's not that they have more hours in the day, it's that they refuse to waste energy on distractions. They channel it into their craft, into their vision, into building something that lasts. Meanwhile, the average person spreads their energy thin across 1,000 meaningless activities and wonders why nothing in their life moves forward. Energy also dictates the company you keep. Spend time with people who drain you and you'll feel tired even if you did nothing. Negative conversations, toxic environments, people who only complain. These are like parasites that live off your energy. On the other hand, being around people with vision, drive, and positivity charges you up, makes you sharper, and pushes you forward. Protecting your energy isn't just about what you avoid, it's also about who you allow into your circle. The people around you either multiply your energy or subtract from it, and over time, that difference shapes the direction of your life. Even your inner dialogue affects your energy. When your self-talk is full of doubt, fear, or regret, you're draining yourself from the inside out. Discipline with your thoughts is just as important as discipline with your actions. Shifting your focus toward gratitude, possibility, and solutions recharges you instead of emptying you. That doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means not feeding them with endless worry that solves nothing. Your energy is precious, and wasting it on things outside your control robs you twice. Once because the problem still exists, and again because you've weakened yourself dealing with it. Energy management is also tied to habits. The small daily rituals you practice either refill your tank or deplete it. Eating clean, staying hydrated, exercising, getting enough rest, these are not luxuries, they are investments in your energy account. Skip them and you'll pay with fatigue and poor focus. Prioritize them and you'll have the strength to attack bigger challenges. People often think discipline and productivity are about time management, but the truth is they're about energy management. Time is fixed, but energy fluctuates, and knowing how to protect it gives you a massive advantage. Ultimately, energy is currency because it can be spent, saved, and invested. Spend it on gossip, mindless entertainment, and negativity, and it disappears with nothing to show for it. Save it through boundaries, rest, and clarity, and you'll always have reserves for what matters. Invest it in your vision, your growth, and your purpose, and the returns will multiply far beyond the energy you put in. What determines where you end up in life is not how much energy you start with, but how wisely you choose to use it. Habits are not just things you do, they are the building blocks of who you become. Every action you repeat trains your brain to believe that's the kind of person you are, whether you recognize it or not. That's why people say you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. A goal is just a picture in your head, but habits are the actions that make that picture real. If you consistently practice good habits, you align yourself with the identity of someone who deserves the results you want. If you ignore them, you build the identity of someone who wishes for change but never creates it. Think about someone who wants to get healthy. They might set a goal of losing weight or running a marathon, but unless their daily habits reflect that, the goal stays out of reach. Waking up early to train, drinking water instead of soda, choosing to move instead of sitting all day. Those repeated actions slowly create the identity of a healthy person. Over time, they don't have to force themselves to live that way anymore because it feels natural, it feels like who they are. The opposite is also true. If someone repeatedly eats junk food, skips exercise, and ignores sleep, they create the identity of an unhealthy person, and that identity reinforces itself. Habits are powerful because they shape your self-image. If you write a page every day, you don't just become someone who's trying to write, you become a writer. If you save money consistently, you're not just someone working on finances, you become disciplined with money. The labels you attach to yourself are built on proof, and the proof comes from the habits you perform day in and day out. Once your identity shifts, you don't rely on motivation anymore because your actions are aligned with who you believe you are. Motivation comes and goes, but identity is sticky. The small nature of habits is what makes them deceptively powerful. A single push-up doesn't make you fit, but doing push-ups daily shifts you toward fitness. Reading for 10 minutes doesn't make you wise, but reading daily shifts you toward knowledge. These tiny actions act like drops of water on stone, almost invisible in the short term, but undeniable over time. This is why change feels so hard for most people. They underestimate the impact of repetition and overestimate the impact of a single event. Habits don't demand perfection, they demand consistency. The identity created by habits also influences decision-making. Once you see yourself as a disciplined person, you make disciplined choices naturally. If you see yourself as someone who always procrastinates, you continue to procrastinate even when you know better. Your brain likes to stay consistent with your identity, even if that identity is negative. This is why breaking bad habits feels like breaking free from chains. It's not just about changing an action. It's about rewriting the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. Habits also free up mental space. When you establish strong routines, your brain doesn't have to waste energy deciding whether to act. If it's a habit to go for a run after work, you don't negotiate with yourself every day, you just do it. That automation is what makes people highly effective. They've designed their identity through habits so that good choices happen without constant struggle. Instead of relying on willpower, they rely on systems. Another layer is how habits stack together. One good habit often triggers another. Waking up early might lead to exercising, which leads to eating healthier, which leads to more focus at work. These small actions create a ripple effect that strengthens your identity even further. On the flip side, bad habits also cluster. Staying up late leads to sleeping in, which leads to skipping workouts, which leads to grabbing fast food, and suddenly the identity of someone lazy or unhealthy feels reinforced. The cycle works in both directions, and your daily habits decide which way it spins. The most liberating part about habits is that they give you control over identity. Instead of leaving it to chance, you don't have to wait for a big event to change who you are. You simply act in alignment with the person you want to be until it becomes real. If you want to be confident, act like someone confident would act consistently, even if it feels fake at first. If you want to be successful, build the habits successful people practice, and over time that identity will feel natural. Your habits are the evidence you present to yourself every day, and eventually they shape the version of you that steps out into the world. The compound effect is one of the most underestimated forces in life because it hides behind actions that feel too small to matter. It's the principle that tiny, consistent choices multiply into results far greater than the original effort. Most people ignore it because they're looking for dramatic change, a breakthrough moment that shifts everything overnight, but real change usually works quietly, stacking small wins until one day the results are impossible to miss. The compound effect doesn't care about speed. It cares about direction, and it rewards patience like nothing else. Take money as an example. If you put aside a small amount every day or every week, it may not feel like much in the beginning. A few dollars saved doesn't change your lifestyle, but over time, those deposits add up with interest and growth. What once felt like pocket change becomes real wealth. The same principle applies to debt in reverse. Using a credit card for little impulse purchases might feel harmless, but those balances grow and compound until they become a heavy chain. That's the power of the compound effect. It multiplies whatever you feed it, whether positive or negative. Health is another place where this principle shows its strength. Eating one unhealthy meal doesn't make you overweight, and eating one healthy meal doesn't make you fit. But repeat either choice daily, and your body transforms in the direction of your habits. That one soda becomes hundreds in a year. That short walk after dinner becomes hundreds of hours of movement in a year. The compound effect rewards consistency, not intensity. One person might push themselves to exhaustion in a single workout, while another takes a steady approach and moves their body every day. A year later, the second person is stronger, healthier, and more consistent, while the first one is often burned out or injured. Relationships grow on the same principle. Trust is built not through one grand gesture, but through countless small actions. Showing up when you said you would, checking in regularly, listening, remembering details, all of those moments add up to a foundation of connection. On the other hand, ignoring small acts of care, failing to communicate, or breaking minor promises may seem insignificant in the moment, but over time they compound into distance and broken bonds. The health of any relationship depends less on rare big moments and more on the daily deposits made into the connection. Even in personal growth, the compound effect is at work. Reading 10 pages of a book each night doesn't feel like much, but over a year, that's thousands of pages, dozens of books, and countless new ideas. Writing a few sentences a day might not seem like progress, but give it time and you'll have a finished manuscript. Practicing a skill for 15 minutes daily may not bring instant mastery, but months later, the improvement is undeniable. This principle proves that what you do regularly matters far more than what you do occasionally. The reason many people fail to benefit from the compound effect is impatience. They try something for a few days or weeks and quit because the results aren't obvious. But the compound effect works like planting a seed. For a long time, it looks like nothing is happening, but under the soil, roots are forming. If you stop too soon, you never see the growth, but if you keep nurturing it, one day the results burst through the surface and everyone else calls it sudden success. What looks like luck is usually just persistence finally made visible. The compound effect also explains why habits are so critical. Every small decision you repeat is a vote for the kind of future you'll live in. Those votes don't seem powerful in isolation, but they accumulate. The person who invests energy in positive habits finds themselves with opportunities, strength, and clarity that seem far out of proportion to the effort. The person who invests energy in negative habits finds themselves trapped by consequences that feel overwhelming, even though they were built one small choice at a time. The compound effect doesn't play favorites, it simply multiplies what you give it. What's most empowering is realizing you don't need massive changes to transform your life. You just need to direct small, steady actions in the right direction and give them enough time to compound. The results may not show in days, but they will show in months and years. Whether you want financial freedom, health, strong relationships, or personal mastery, the path is the same. Commit to the small steps, stay patient, and trust that the compound effect is always working. Silently building your future behind the scenes. Legacy is not something that happens at the end of your life. It's something you build every single day through the choices you make and the habits you practice. Discipline is the thread that connects your present actions to the future story that gets told about you. Every small act of discipline is like laying a brick in a wall, and over years, those bricks form the structure of your reputation, your impact, and what you leave behind. People often think of legacy as some grand achievement, but more often than not, it comes from the small, repeated disciplines that shape who you are and how you affect others. When you commit to discipline, you're not just serving yourself, you're shaping the way others experience you. A parent who shows up every day for their children, who provides stability and guidance through consistent actions, leaves a legacy of love and responsibility. An entrepreneur who maintains the discipline to keep learning, improving, and pushing forward, even when nobody's watching, leaves behind not only the businesses they built, but also the example of perseverance that inspires others. Discipline doesn't just create results in the moment. It ripples forward into the lives of people who watch, learn, and remember. Discipline also protects your legacy from being fragile. Talent can create moments of success, but without discipline, that success collapses. History is filled with stories of people who had all the talent in the world but lost everything because they lacked the discipline to manage it. On the other hand, those who built their lives on discipline left behind achievements that stood the test of time. Discipline creates sustainability, and sustainability is what transforms short-term victories into lasting contributions. A legacy isn't about one shining moment. It's about being consistent enough to let your impact stretch beyond your lifetime. Every small disciplined habit carries forward. Choosing to work when you don't feel like it, choosing to save instead of spend recklessly, choosing to practice kindness instead of reacting with anger, those small decisions stack up into patterns. Over years, those patterns define your character, and your character defines your legacy. People may forget the details of your life, but they will never forget how your discipline, or lack of it, shaped the way you lived and treated others. The quiet strength of discipline becomes the loudest part of your story once you're gone. What makes discipline so powerful in shaping legacy is that it doesn't only benefit you while you're alive, it creates pathways for others. The disciplined artist who hones their craft daily leaves behind a body of work that inspires generations. The disciplined leader who keeps integrity at the center of their decisions leaves behind standards that others rise to meet. The disciplined worker who provides for their family leaves behind security values and examples of resilience that echo long after they're gone. Discipline multiplies beyond the individual because the impact of consistent action always spills outward. It's also important to realize that legacy doesn't require perfection. Discipline is not about never slipping, it's about returning to the path over and over. People don't remember you for being flawless. They remember you for being steady. The person who fell and got back up again, who refused to quit, who kept pushing despite obstacles. That's the kind of discipline that leaves a lasting impression. The legacy comes not from looking invincible, but from showing others what resilience really looks like. Every day, you're casting votes for the kind of legacy you'll leave. Skipping discipline is easy in the moment, but over time, it leaves behind gaps and regrets. Practicing discipline feels difficult in the moment, but over time, it leaves behind strength, achievement, and a sense of meaning. Legacy lives in those choices because they accumulate into a life story that speaks louder than words. Whether it's your children, your community, your industry, or the people who read your story decades later, what they inherit is not the things you own, but the discipline you lived by. So when you strip it all down, life isn't transformed by some magical breakthrough, some sudden stroke of luck, or one dramatic choice. It's built brick by brick, day by day, through those tiny habits that either sharpen you or dull you. Consistency shapes your discipline. Discipline protects your energy. Energy fuels your habits, and those habits form your identity. Stack that long enough, and the compound effect does its work, leaving behind not just results for yourself, but a legacy that speaks louder than words ever could. The truth is, you don't have to overhaul your whole life today. You just have to pick one small action and repeat it until it becomes who you are. Success isn't about intensity. It's about staying the course. Freedom isn't found in shortcuts. It's found in discipline. And the legacy you leave isn't written in one moment. It's written in the daily choices you make right now. So ask yourself, what's the one tiny habit you can start today that your future self will thank you for? Because those little choices aren't little at all. They're the foundation of everything you'll ever build.